Greetings! Welcome to the Dracovin Empire, everybody! Are you ready to dive back into the world of Golarion, the setting of the Pathfinder role-playing game system? I hope you are. We're visiting another country today, somewhere deep in the northeastern area of Avistan. So if you're ready, grab my hand, your host and guide here at Dracovin, as I open the gates so that we can plane shift our way to Golarion, to Avistan, to see and learn about everything that's going on. It's going to be a little dangerous, but remember, keep your guard, like, subscribe, ring the bell, and leave a comment. I'm opening the gates. Take my hand. Golarion awaits. We plane shifted here. We are in Brevoy today. That's the country we're going to be learning about. I hope you're ready to dive into its interesting and chaotic history. But if we were to talk about Brevoy somewhere, well, and to dive into it even deeper, what are some sources? I have some books, perhaps I could look at. Well, from first edition, there are 3 books to recommend. The Campaign Settings and Inner Sea World Guide provide basic information. But interestingly enough, I would also call out the Stolen Lands from the Kingmaker Adventure Pack. Whether or not you're taking it from any of the updated versions of the Kingmaker or the original Stolen Lands book, it's a good place for me. And then for second edition, World Guide. It does give updates on what's kind of going on in Brevoy and that region. So let's start at the basics of Brevoy. It's a nation that is basically on the verge of tearing itself apart. That's the easiest way to describe it. The two-headed dragon means a lot. It's a political entry that was once 2 vastly different nations locked in a constant state of war before a foreign despot, Chorl the Conqueror, basically came in and united them under one flag. And then Chorl and his descendants disappeared, and now Brevoy is alone. Currently, King Regent Nolski Stukvoka is in charge from New Steven, and is the hereditary monarch of this place, keeping it going, basically. Yeah, that's the basics of Brevoy. It kind of gives you an idea about how things are going. Not well. There's Chorl. That's the image we have from the Legends book. So, it's only existed as a nation since 4499. That's only about 200 years old. Remember, in the current timeline, it's now 4725. The year just changed in the Pathfinder timeline. It's 47, the year to figure out timeline if books come out and stories come out. I've said this a lot. I keep reminding you. So yeah, it's like 200 years old. And, well, things haven't been going well for the last quarter century. But yeah, it does link to 2 different nations that came before Brevoy. Isa and Rosslyn. Now I can give a little bit about each of these old nations. Isa came into existence from Taldan explorers that came from the disease-ravaged frontier colony of the Argorian Empire. That's basically them, that they were just existing there, and they're much more of a area around for river pirates rather than architecture the same way, or agriculture the same way. Rossland, on the other hand, was another land that was more farm-based, and was linked to the 5th Army of Exploration from Taldan in the River Kingdoms. So, both these nations did exist and have some history, but Brevoy as a whole didn't. You know, Brosland can date back to 2009 AR. That's over 2,000 years ago when the people came into this region. Anyway, so we get Chorl coming in, changing this. He defeated and had the surrender of the 2 nations. He christened his family house Garvia, and he ruled this new land for a decade before disappearing, leaving his descendants to it. And they used the threat of his return and fearsome dragon allies to maintain power. The dragons seemingly disappearing after Brevoy's creation, but they returned once to late stage to Skywatch, basically an observatory turned fortress that held those still loyal to Rossland, basically trying to get rid of a little bit of a rebellion, those usual kind of things. Anyway. So, the legend of his conquest, the actual conquest, these are two different things. We talk legend first. So Chorrol arrived and conquered Brevoy in an interesting story. It tells that he arrived at Needle Lake, the current Lake Riccal, and with a ragged band of soldiers and knight, numbering about 300, he did a collation of the new nation of Brevoy that would accomplish much of the land. That was Isa and Rossland. He declared his declaration was almost completely ignored by both nations that perceived Chorrol, and neither perceived him as a threat. Rossland eventually had a deal with him when he began sending tax collectors from his settlement of New Steven and to force the citizens to support his usurping the government. They sent a small army to deal with him. They basically underestimated his cunning, and the army would walk into an ambush. They lured into a river canyon south of New Steven, where he unleashed his secret red dragon allies. We'll be dragon allies now because red dragons don't exist anymore. Just dragon allies. The army was trapped within the canyon. Basically, very few survivors. The dragons rampaged across Rossland, forced his leaders to surrender within days, and seeing the devastation that he caused, the Istian lords basically surrendered immediately, declaring him part of the new aristocracy. The truth behind this, though, from what we know from actual history, beyond that story which is spread about him, a wonderful, wonderful story, is he arrived in Brevoy crossing the Lake of Mist and Vales from Iboria. He met with Lord Nikos Strutvar of Isa, who immediately surrendered in the face of his large army. In exchange, he and the rest of House Tuvura were allowed to retain in prestige and possession, became vassals of House Rogarby. Then he turned his attention to Rossland and the Adori Swords Lords, who actually failed much the same way on Legends recount. The entire army against army lured into a trap, dragons slaughtered them. That actually probably happened. But the entire thing with Isa kind of just surrendering in its way, there's also, saying that it was possible that Lord Nikos's, Struforia's daughter was married to Chorrol to have kind of cement them together in those early on days of kind of connecting together. So, there you go. But things don't necessarily go very well now. We have to talk about now, beyond the stories of the conquest and what happened. The Rovgarians' rule ended with the disappearance of every member of House Rovgaria in 4699, 26 years ago, in an event known as the Vanishing, leaving Brevoy's noble families to basically pick up the pieces and fall back to their centuries-old disagreements. House Stuvola gained the upper hand, and Noleski Stuvola basically rules fragile Brevoy today. Remember, Nikos Stuvola of Isa was the one that basically surrendered and joined with Chorrol to keep the lands. Saw an army, saw what was going on, read the walls. Read what was going to happen. Anyway. So this is Brevoy, a little country that could, up in the corner here. So, it's bordered to the west by Numeria, south by the River Kingdoms, east by Oboria, and the continent of Casmaron. It's basically got boundaries between old kingdoms of Asir, Isa, and Rossland still exist. The north is basically from north to south. The north is mostly rugged hills that are unstable for agriculture. South is full of the Gazai Forest, Rossland Plains, and fertile grasslands that are basically the breadbasket of the entire nation. As large tracts of arable land in the northeast of Avistan. Basically, Rossland was one of the most arable, farmable places in this region. So it can take trades to travel between small settlements, longer between large population clusters. Most towns and cities are located in the base of mountains, along lakes, beside riverways. The Lake of Mist and Vales is incredibly important here. It forms its northern border, and the Icemire peaks on its eastern border with Old Iboria. And it's got a lot of ports and points of interest within these areas, if we can talk. The Ozera River that flows east into the Lake Real, across the lands of House Garrus and some other East Solent River, it connects into here. So there's a lot of rivers that travel through this area. And a lot of lakes, and it makes the place a very geographically well placed. Let's talk the cities. We can talk about New Steven first. It's a large metropolis. It's got over 32,000 people, nearly 33,000 people. The city of wooden palaces, it's known as. It's on the lakes of what was known as Needle Lake, now Lake Reykjavik. It serves as the nation's capital to seek power. It was once where Troll the Conqueror came into. It's a trade city, a hub for the exporting of the supplies of grain, fish, and timber, and ore to the rest of the northern kingdoms like Mennev and Lumeria from Brevoy, and down the East Selin River to the River Kingdoms. Fruit from here sustains many northern realms here, and constant bandit raids or demonic armies make things difficult. Demonic armies less now because of, the everything that happened with the World Wound, but still, some things happen. And because it borders a lot of other countries, rare Numerian sky metals, ancient Osirian relics are just as common in some of the marketplaces here. Strange things that come in from other places. It used a lot of wooden constructions, from mansions to streets to forts, so that's why it's a city of wooden palaces. And due to the number of wooden structures within its walls, it basically has a volunteer firefighter brigade protecting its buildings. The only two-stone structure here are the Ruby Fortress, which houses the Dragon Scale Throne, and the Bulwark of Gorham, the Temple of the Lord of Iron. That's one goes very well with, Gorham being dead now as of last year. So who knows what's happening there. Some other settlements are Brunderston, a mining town in eastern Rossland. Eagle's Watch, near the summit of Mount Veska in Brevoy. I'll see one of the houses. An ally of our vanished house, Golarion. Greyhaven, in western Brevoy. High Delve, in the Vloshkin Mountains, in western Brevoy. Nivatka's Crossing, a village in the southern end of Rossland, situated in northern banks of the Shrike River, overlooking the stolen lands of the River Kingdoms to the south. Port Ice, on the southern bank of the list of Makes of Vales. It's basically a refugee for ruffians and lake pirates. Former capital of Isa. It has been a seat of conniving pirate lords of House Stuva. Remember, House Stuva now rules the entire country. So, yeah. Of course, who's in charge of this is not our king. The uncle of the king, Domani Stupo, is in charge of this place. Goes to show you. Yep. Restov. We do have to talk about Restov a little bit. It's the free city of Restov, which is interesting. It's one of the two largest cities in the Restov region, and it is known as the free city, but it's technically allied with Brevoy. This is the place where basically the last bastion of Restov is. The Aldori dueling style, the Aldori swords fighters, which were a big part of Restov and helped Rossland and helped defend them. It still remains here. The birthplace of it. It still has several Aldori and Taldan dueling schools within its region. So, yes. Basically, the Aldori duelists, after Rossland was conquered, they came here from the United Brevoy. And so they've kind of been on their own, but they have still remained allied. Basically, they've walked a fine line in Brevoy, and haven't had a reason to do anything other than walk that fine line. Silverhall is located in the Azoa River in Brevoy. Skywatch is interesting because it's a big observatory turned fortress. I mentioned it. So, there's a lot of stories to Skywatch. We can go into it, but it does deal with one of the adventure paths. Hey, the Gateswalker's adventure paths deals with what's going on in Skywatch. So I won't go into it in full details here. We're not talking about Skywatch, we're talking about Brevoy. But if you want to know what was going on in this observatory turned fortress and the various things here, where it was sealed for 20 years until reopened in 4722, basically 3 years ago, there's a story there. And it relates to everything that happened with Troll the Conqueror and all the things that happened with them and the departure of his family. So yeah, to a degree. So it's like, if you want to look more into some of that stuff, I recommend the Adventure Path. I'm not going to get too much into it because, we don't need to, because it deals a little bit with that and a little not with Anyway, a couple more places. Stone Climb, a fortress on the Icemere Peaks in Brevoy, on the eastern side of things. Winter Break on Acumbin Isle on the Lake of Mist and Vales. And, of course, I'm going to butcher this one because it's Zmeyka, Zmieka, in western Brevoy. They became a flashpoint point in conflict between two of the houses for rulership of Brevoy. It deals, again, with a Pathfinder Society adventure on the border of war. So this was kind of the conflict between House Orlovsky and Stuvoka. So, yes. It is assumed, basically, that with the disputes, things remain peaceful post this time. That adventure basically took place in 4717. So yeah. But this was the Baron Oberyn Volinich basically kept things at peace until he passed away. This is dealing with the aftermath. So if you want to look into on the border of war and what happened there, or what kind of could happen there, just assume Brevoy remains and stands. We know it stands, and whatever happened there didn't break things. Anyway, those are our cities in Brevoy. Ooh. Alright, let's talk about who's in charge of Brevoy. Of course, we have our good friend here, who's our current ruler, King Regent Noleski Sturtova. I'm saying their name. Sturtova. So it's a hereditary monarchy. House Rogarvia should rule. It ruled for 200 years. But with the family disappearing in the winter of 4699, and no evidence of where they went, now Stuvoka rules over, from House Stuvoka, who issued a public declaration of his ascent to the throne on the 21st of Kuthona in 4699. The reason he rose to power is due to him being of the line of Nikos Tuvoa and Mirna Rogarvia. Basically, he is descended from a Rogarvia, but he was more on the Stuvoka side. At his side sits his sister, Natala Stuvoka, who's kind of the unofficial queen, basically until her bachelor brother actually marries, which there is actually a large portion of the populace that's like, hey, get married. Of course, he lives in the Ruby Fortress and sits upon the Dragonscale throne. He has maintained this rule by allying with former enemies and using fear of the House of Return of House Rogarvia as a tool to unite it and its 7 noble families. Most of Issa supports the Ascension. Rossland has done so reluctantly. Basically, the Issa nobles, good with that. The Rossland nobles, Houses like House Orlslovsky only acknowledges Noleski as a reigning Lord Regent, and diplomatic relations grow tense. Hey, I mentioned House Orskly, who basically had our problems there. You know? We talked about them before. So, the possible collapse of the nation seems to be just teetering on that brink constantly. They just maintain this fine line of almost breaking apart, but not. And Noleski has created the Dragonscale Loyalists, basically a secret group of agents bound to flush out traitors and conspirators against the noble courts and the nation's rule. They have a secret police now, too. Yay! Ooh. So let's talk about the noble families that traced their lineages back before the invasion of Troll the Conqueror. Some were barbarians, raiders, or pirates who were elevated nobility by pledging fealty to the conqueror. Males tend to lead each house, with the eldest son inheriting the father's title and estates. Other sons may receive something, but there's no law requiring this to be significant. Women can be regents for male heirs until they turn 15, and regents often work behind the scenes to influence the lord. Noble families are large, and most preferring to ensure at least 2 sons. Since the founding, there have been a lot of marriages and alliances between major houses. So there's 7 major houses, with 1 missing. Rogarvia, with its motto, with sword and flame. House Garrus, with strong as the mountain. House Lebeda with success through grace. House Lodovka, the waters are fields. House Mendevyid, endurance overcomes all. House Orlovsky, high above. And House Stuvoka, ours is the rank. Basically, with House Stuvoka, Sturtova and House Lebeda, basically they have an alliance between them, which kind of would be like Rosland and Isa, Lebeda being from Rosland, Sturtova being from Isa. But this alliance actually did fall apart when Natala Sturtova accused Lord Lander Lebeda of treason. Lord Lebeda secretly disappeared, and Elena Labrador left out of solidarity. So there was this alliance, some things happened. And they do have military too, which we can talk about. They have several regiments called Talon armies, most of which are located in Isa. The Crown Knights are the cavalry, and the Stefan Shield serves as the capitalist's home guard. The mercenary hillfolk known as the Company of the Red Claw are loyal to the throne. King Sturtova may call upon the noble houses to provide trained soldiers, peasant conscript, as well as neighbor powers of privateers from Port Ice. So basically, there is a pretty big military force. The noble houses are required currently, and since none are technically open rebellion to provide armies, the privateers of Lake Ice, hey, if they need a navy, they are called upon. So, yeah. There's diplomatic ties with a lot of these nations here, but it's kind of fractured. Except for, like, Ramirez. No one like Ramirez Priest coming in. Ramirez Priest coming in sucks. They suck for Ramirez. Just keep out. Okay. With long, harsh winters and this far north, a short spring and summer seasons require the populace to farm and fish just enough food to keep on the table. Its arable land is located in Rostov and exports major amounts of foodstuff to the entire region. Isa's sailors control most of the trade and keep the profits to themselves, which has generated resentment to the Roslanders, who seek to have the wealth distributed more equally. The Isians countered that their ships and trade agreements generate most of the nation's wealth and argue that these profits are needed to reinvest in the fleets, lest they are overtaken by foreign competitors. Their main imports are cloth, books, finished goods, spices, while common exports are copper, fur, fish, shellfish, grain, iron, salt, and timber. Stone is uncommon for buildings, and most buildings are from wood. Hey, we talked about that with their capital, the wood capital. After the world wound closed in 4718 and the end of the Fifth Mendevian Crusade, their increased trade in the Lake of Mist and Vales basically helped them. And the need to resettle the formerly demon-plagued land basically driven up the demand for their stock of seed and hardy livestock. Remember, they're in a hardy region, even the arable region. It's hardy people. So hey, they've been shipping some things in, oh, you need some really great seeds that are really hardy for this demon-tainted land, or livestock that can deal with shit. You know, hey, we're willing to trade that for extra price. Now the Whispering Tide ascent in the Gravelands, relocating the Eye of Terror and Lake Carthan, has also had positive economic effect on Brevoy, and driven a trade away from the waterways towards the Selen River, which originates in Brevoy. So Brevoy is on the up, and a lot of trade and money and wealth coming in, which is another reason that can lead to tensions between the noble houses that want to control this, and maybe don't want to share with each other. Yes, it's a mess. It is a mess that is being dealt with, mostly. Let's talk about the people of Brevoy. The peasants are the largest part of the population, no taxes and fealties to one of the households. They work from dawn to dusk, farmers if they live in Rossland, fishers or miners if they live in Isa. Whoever controls the house visits the local taverns in the evening. During winters, when fishing and farming can't be done, household chores fill the day. Peasants live simple lives, support their families, and avoid the nose of nobles and priests. Many are descended from Taldan humans, from the early explorers, though basically because the nation does have a broad cultural tolerance, there are many ethnicities here. Lost Kelid clans from Numeria, descendants of the Chorol the Conquering's armies, migrating Grisians passing through, Chalaxians, Kalishkians, Ulfins, visitors and outcasts. There's a noble population of dwarfs, particularly in Bruntun, Avorians, Dromars, Halflings. And with the closing of the World War and the end of the Mendevian Crusade, has brought idle warriors to Brevoy. Many of them signed up as mercenaries to the great houses and began to study Aldori sword lords. These soldiers are often traumatized by their experience fighting demons and can be prone to violence, adding to the already violent nature of this, or mood of this nation. So yeah, and there's a lot of languages there. Certainly speaking, Taldane is the common language of the Avistan continent, is the common tongue here. But there are like Hallet, Scalad, Varisians, Draconic, because of the connections to those dragons, is a language that's actually strangely spoken by non-dragons. Probably one of the larger populations of non-dragons to know Draconic in this area. As for religion, Abadar is the unifying religious force in Brevoy. They respect him and have all interactions with his followers each time they travel to the markets. Merchants and trade people are Abadar's most diligent worshippers here, and his temples are places of trade and justice. Those who have Abadar's golden keys are often given recognition as neutral arbiters or judges. Yeah. Gorham had a pretty big place here. His household priests often serve as Brevoy's nobles who walk around dressed in gaudy red tabernacles. Now he's dead. So, yeah. There's probably some things going on there. We don't talk about it. Pharasma is beloved by the common people. Her clerics are the least pretentious and often serve as midwives, healers, and morticians. And, yeah, though they are the most common in Virgo, Erastil is sometimes worshipped in more rural areas, and scatter the Mashtun cults basically endure Crusaders trying to exterminate them because, hey, it's a lot of violence in the middle of nowhere, a lot of that separations. But there you go. There's Brevoy. I call it a nutshell, but, I did go over a lot of details. It's an interesting nation that we've had some storylines and some adventures in that you can also pick out and play some of those adventures. Certainly speaking, it connects up with things in the Kingmaker adventure path. I talked about the various little adventures that you could do from the adventure, the Gatewalker's adventure path for Gatewatch, or if you go to Nikia to do the On Borders of War Pathfinder Society scenario. There are a lot of places that have dealt with Brevoy, and we know Brevoy still maintains that kind of tenseness as of now. Granted, Gorham's death, we haven't heard any major updates from Brevoy. It still maintains that. I guess it's always been on that cusp of violence. A little extra anger isn't going to break them, They've always been on that cusp of, falling apart, fighting each other. But, a little bit more anger from the death of Gorham and, God's reign and all that kind of stuff isn't enough to drive them any more deeper into that. Good for them! But it does mean they're still on that thing, and tensions run high. And certainly without Gorham's support and his clerics maybe losing their abilities and stuff like that, that's a pretty big thing about what's going on. So there are ramifications from what happened just basically probably a few months ago in their timeline that may echo this year or in the future soon. So what will happen to Brevoy? Will it break apart into two nations? Will it maintain itself? Will the Lost Lands return? There's also, will the dragons return? But there's so many questions that cannot be answered now about Brevoy, but it makes a very interesting setting, and the tension, and the amount of trade, and the importance of it as a location. Maybe that's also what keeps it going. All that extra trade, its now importance to the region keeps it going. A lot of questions. I hope you enjoyed it. Alright. We'll leave it there. If you like this video, remember to support it. Like, subscribe, ring the bell, leave a comment. What do you think about Brevoy? Have you done any adventures there? Have you done something like Kingmaker where you've dealt with Brevoy kind of on the side? Let me know. I'm interested what you think of all of this and Brevoy's existence. It's a lot of interesting ideas and concepts and things that are going on there. So, yeah. If you want to see more of my stuff, I have a schedule that goes up every day of when I'm doing stuff live on Twitch, when I'm putting up stuff on YouTube. That goes up on my social media. You can also see updates to the schedule, thoughts and patterns, tactics, all that kind of stuff. That's on my Discord, the big one, with also my Blue Sky, my X/Twitter, and of course, over on the community page, the schedule goes up from YouTube. That's the big thing over there. But that lets you know anytime I'm live on Twitch. Those times are a little bit more malleable because of life schedule, but what I'm doing on those days is usually exact, unless I change things for major things, hey, those updates. And then the YouTube schedule is pretty exact. So only if there's video problems do that switch around. Alright, I'm going. I hope you enjoyed today. I hope you enjoyed joining me on this journey to Brevoy, learning all about it, diving into the culture and the country, and just being here and learning about another interesting area in Golarion that maybe you want to venture in. Until the next time, we chat about Golarion, some other role-playing game system, some other world, lore, whatever it is. I bid all of you out there a deep and wonderful farewell.